Okay, welcome, especially if you're watching this after the fact, because otherwise it would just be a screen of me staring at the screen, a video of me staring at the screen for 5 minutes until everybody starts joining. I'm going to make sure everything is ready to go while we wait for people to join. That's working. Welcome, Jason and Marie. And Chris, welcome as well. Okay, let's close that. Close that too. Okay, chat right there. Okay, all right. So I assume all of you have read the post. We're gonna do a live stream. We went to Shawnee State Forest. I'm probably just gonna type. This is kind of, so the last few times we've released episodes, we've released it onto Patreon, saw a bunch of mistakes we made, and then fix it. This time, I think it's definitely ready to go, but just as a final check, this is gonna be the stream where we do a watch through with you guys. And then if it's not ready, I'm not gonna post it onto Patreon itself and then re-render and re-upload. So unfortunately, that means if there are any mistakes in the episode, it'll be another like day or two before you'll be able to watch the actual full video. Because the main thing is I don't want people's comments to keep getting removed, because every time we do a Patreon early release and then change it, that old video has like 20 comments from you guys that nobody will ever see because we had to take it off. Welcome, Sal. So anyways, the point of all that is that I'm not going to be talking too much, and I'm just going to type as we watch. So it'll be more or less a normal viewing experience. Okay, let's start in another, it's 2:01 p.m. and 37 seconds. Let's start in another couple of minutes. We'll wait. There's nothing else to report right now. Next up, we'll be editing a video, or editing the episode from Grayson Highlands State Park, which if you Google that, there's something really cool at that place, which you'll get to see in the episode. You'll get to see plenty of that in the episode. It's a spoiler for the couple of people who are watching right now, the 9 people. But it'll be really cool. Acadia National Park does sound cool. We got to get everywhere at some point, but it's just, those big trips are really daunting because, you have to plan them out way ahead of time. Anyways, okay, we've waited long enough. It's now been 1 minute since I last said, let's wait a couple of minutes. So here we go. Where's our window? We lost it. I don't remember closing it. What happened? Okay, let's see. Does it show up? Oh, it shows up. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna play it and then I'm gonna shut up.
While living at his cabin in the woods surrounding Walden Pond, Thoreau noted that if all people lived as simply as he did, thieving and robbery would be unknown. When we first started Adventure Archives, we wanted to discover what the outdoors could teach us about ourselves and our society. Why did nature seem to bring out the best in people? We set out to answer the question, what is lacking in our civilized lives that wilderness has to offer? Today, we adventure into the forests of our own home state to take in the lessons that our wild earth freely gives away. Our adventure today started on a very windy day.
But despite the high winds, we cruised along the highway towards the southern end of Ohio, where the foothills of the Appalachians began rising above the horizon.
We passed by flooded valleys and industrial structures as we drove through small towns and rural areas.
We arrived at our trailhead parking lot, a wide open space that reminded us of some of our past trips in Ohio.
After gearing up, we walked over to an information board so we could review our plan while looking at the large trail map.
There's no map.
We filled out our backpacker registration form, then reviewed our plan as we made our way to the trailhead.
Our hike would take us on the 19.6-mile northern loop, which has 3 campsites. We would camp first at Camp 1, then hike more the next day, camping at Camp 3, before taking a connecting day hike trail back to the trailhead. It was a decent hike to our first campsite, but we were happy to be moving.
Okay, so we've got 6 miles to our campsite tonight. On this trail, you have to stay on certain campsites. You can't just camp wherever you want. So that is a decent amount of hiking for us to do. Windy and cold, but very exciting to actually be on the trail again after being cooped up inside for God knows how long.
As we hiked, Andrew of course noticed some trees he wanted to talk about.
As we're walking, I'm noticing these massive oak trees. And I feel like trees like that are really easy to overlook, especially when you're used to this kind of landscape. But when you take a closer look and you see how they're all covered in moss, it's like, you really get a sense that these are relatively ancient trees. It's kind of cool.
In a place like Ohio, you start to notice the subtleties of hiking, including how it makes you feel.
Though some may dismiss this landscape as bland or boring, we think forests like these can be the best place to really learn from nature and reflect.
And while there may not always be grandiose mountains and valleys to take in, there are plenty of natural wonders to appreciate from a closer distance.
So these big old kind of hollow fibrous stalks, you usually see this plant growing in the meadows instead of a forest, but this belongs to giant hogweed, which is in the same family as wild carrot and poisonous hemlock. But these plants, when they're green, if you touch them, they can actually irritate your skin. But they basically look like giant Queen Anne's lace flowers. We talked about this tree many times before, but this really straight, tall tree is a tulip poplar. The bark has like a certain cantaloupe texture, but if that's too hard for you to tell, you can also look up in the branches and you'll see these like leftovers of these flowers or seed pods. They kind of look like a tulip, even though that's not where the name comes from. It actually comes from the flower. But underneath is this really big tulip poplar stick. And the way you can tell it is tulip poplar is the bark typically has this like kind of fibrous texture to it. It's kind of a subtler thing to pick up on. But because we are trying to make a fire at some point, I'm gonna take some of this bark. You can kind of see how it like peels off in these satisfying chunks.
There was this legendary time where we went to a bachelor party and it was in a cabin in the woods. Andrew walks in and he's just got all this bark hanging out of his pockets of his hoodie. It was tulip poplar and he had just been collecting it in the backyard. So we started a fire with it. It's a good bonfire though. So from the minimal Googling that I did, this place is known as the Smokies of Ohio. And so far, this uphill is definitely living up to the name.
Pretty smoky.
What's that?
This looks to me like the droppings of either like a coyote or some other carnivore. It's got all this fur in it, and two, like the tips of the droppings are kind of pointy. And I've heard that that's typically a sign of some sort of a canine or something.
We hiked further up the Smokies-esque uphills and came across more curiosities.
This looks like some sort of dropping, but well, there's like beans and stuff in here too.
That looks like a little rodent. And I remember doing my owl pellet dissection, but it wasn't that big though.
No, this looks like this is poop. This is definitely poop. And there's like fragments of bone inside.
Yeah,
This looks
like
some sort
somebody
of joint.
just ate an entire squirrel.
Like that's
Like
not
a
a skull.
yeah.
No, that's
Nope.
that's a joint.
Whoa.
I'm pretty sure.
As fascinating as the poop was, and I say that unironically, we had some distance to cover, and there were plenty more uphills to hike.
But as exhausting as it was trudging up the steep slope, we were still glad to be out in the brisk, late winter air.
Doing nothing can be more tiring than doing something really hard. Like sitting inside this whole winter, I felt so lethargic.
Yeah, although you can convince me better once we're going downhill.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, I agree.
Along the steep hillsides to our left, tall trees and fallen logs surrounded us. Their palette of earthy tones and tall, rigid trunks mesmerized us as they swayed in the powerful wind.
The wind really was no joke. The forest dampened its effects, but this weekend they had reached up to 60 miles per hour. As we made our way up another steep uphill, we came across more poop. If only we had our resident scatologist with us.
We found more poop. It's definitely some sort of coyote, because like, look how long the tail on this one is. And you can actually see some tiny rat bones, or like little rodent bones in there. There's just like a coyote walking and pooping along the whole way.
He's like, man, I ate too much today.
It's not just the landscape that seems familiar to me, it's also like the weather that we're having. Clouds rolling in the sun on the distant hills, it's like super nostalgic. It's kind of dreamlike, I guess.
Every time I'm out on the trail and the only thing you hear are like the sounds of the wind and the trees and there's no sounds of civilization, it's literally like the top 5 feeling in the world.
Yeah, it might seem really bland, but I love being out on trail in this type of weather during this season.
Oh yeah.
A love for gray, drab weather like this develops first from realizing you don't have to deal with humid heat, bugs, and overgrown vegetation. And as you learn to appreciate the open, defoliated winter forest, you realize there's even more to it than that.
With weather like this, backpacking is distilled into something more fundamental. It's just you and the woods out there. There's none of the stuff that people typically think of as beautiful to distract you from your relationship to your physical surroundings. You begin to realize that the forest has more to offer than scenery and wildflowers. That in the woods, there's an invigorating freedom and a comforting serenity.
Winding down from the hills, the path now ran parallel to a calm, flowing stream.
Near the stream, there were a couple of curiosities, like a large tree with a bit of history carved into it.
With beech trees like this, you always get people carving into the bark, but this one's been around so long. 1984. That's how many years ago? That's
34.
yeah.
That's when I was born.
Oh yeah. Oh whoa.
Kind of a strange spot for a fire, you know?
Yeah, it's a really big fire pit too. Part of me wonders if there used to be more of a bank here and it got eroded away or something. Because it looks like some of the stones have collapsed into the water too.
We continued hiking through the valley. All around us were signs of decay and rebirth, rotting logs disintegrating into the soil or turning into a substrate for moss.
And the change in incline made us reflect even more on the fleeting nature of time.
It's funny how quickly things change. You're hiking through some beautiful flat ground along a stream, feeling great. And the next moment you're going uphill. And just in that moment, you forget all the goodness in the world.
What do you think's over this hill?
A beautiful meadow with a campsite and singing choirs and, and a buffet.
After all of the exhausting uphill hiking, we were now at the top of a ridge.
Maybe not quite the choirs you were hoping for, but nice view.
While catching our breath, we had checked our progress.
So we're a little less than halfway to the campsite, and I feel like we've been hiking for hours, so we're gonna try to buckle down and actually make some good progress.
Thankfully, the flat ridgetop trail made it easier for us to make some progress. Before long, we had come to an opening in the woods where the evening light shined through.
moments like these that elevate wilderness backpacking to more than just a hobby for us.
The act of exerting yourself physically, breathing in fresh air with none of civilization's constraints trapping you physically or mentally, transform these small periods of rest into a transcendental experience.
These experiences help us realize that there's more to life than just what's around us.
Beyond the confines of our cubicles, the mundanity of our jobs, and the constraints of society, there are parts of the world that point to a mode of existence that rises above that which we've been told there is no alternative to.
Out here, we have everything that we could ever want, so there's no need to take from others. Here, all of our needs are met, so there's no reason to fear each other. It's a stark contrast to the competitive society we're used to.
So when we were in Japan, we were on a road kind of like this, and we were kind of lost. When we've got like all of our stuff, it's no big deal. Like if you have to just camp on the side, but we literally had nothing. I don't think I've ever felt like any fear when I've actually had a pack, and I know I could weather any storm.
Yeah.
The trail brought us back down into another valley, where we took in the landscape.
This would feel so completely different if we were like in the summer. Like right now the grass is really beautiful and it just feels like nice and open, but I bet during the summer it would just feel really overgrown and crowded.
Yeah, I wonder about that. It's weird how something that can seem mundane has such a charm to it. This landscape is not amazing, it's pretty simple, but somehow just all the little touches are what you really remember.
In a sense, it's the mundanity that kind of makes it special in a way. Just the familiarity of it.
Yeah.
When you really take to heart what the wilderness teaches, you realize how little it takes to feel happy. When you learn from nature, the small things become absolutely sublime. The day faded away, and on the horizon, the sun's last rays lit up the sky in an auburn glow.
The trail led us uphill and suddenly spilled out of the forest and onto a road.
Wow, I did not at all see this from the trail, but we just hit another road.
And I'm almost positive that we're the only people in this entire forest.
Yeah.
Because there was only one car besides ours at the parking lot.
Yeah.
And then over there in the distance you can see lights and stuff. Somebody's having hot cocoa and next to a fire.
And as the fire in the sky faded away, we turned on our headlamps and hiked in the dark.
The first stars began to shine through the night, and in the distance, a radio tower gave off an evocative glow. In the silence of the night, we stopped on the trail to rest and have a snack.
It's funny how peaceful this is right now.
This is like the best thing on planet Earth.
Like normally you'd think being out here at night would be a little scary, but this is just...
Yeah, it is. How many times have we done like this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it never gets old.
Yeah. This is like what existence is supposed to be about.
Oh yeah, get that bite with the rest of it.
What do you think about hustle culture? I don't deny, and in fact I've seen in my own life, that you can make some amazing things happen when you really like hustle every single day. But when I have moments like this, I'm like, man, that is not the way that I want to live the majority of my life, you know?
Yeah. No, I get it in some sense. Like, and what we do requires some of that, but I just think in general, humans are not meant to be constantly obsessed with it. It's not how humans are supposed to be. For a while we were kind of slow in our pace, but we've caught up quite a bit and we're really close to the camp, like maybe a half mile.
Yeah.
But we know that once we intersect with another road, we're gonna get really close.
Yeah, this is our trail because it's got the orange blaze and it says no horseback, but there's another one over there that I believe is for the horses.
Well, it is so much harder to navigate in the dark. Obvious, but
Nonetheless true. This is a brutal uphill climb, man.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about how treacherous it felt in Japan, hiking down from a summit, but most of that was at least downhill.
I'm glad we ate those sandwiches.
We came across some signs that we thought might be a campsite.
There's a sign for the water.
There's a bench up here.
Guess we should take a sit.
It's actually just an open picnic area.
Soda Adams Company, Ohio. This is like an Olympic podium.
Yeah.
We saw an old water spigot that was no longer in use.
Still, we stopped to sit beneath the stars and had a brief period of sublimity.
so how do we even explain moments like that?
I don't know. We had such a period of struggle hiking up what seemed like endless uphill. And we got to the top and just, there was the bench and we just sat, looked up at the stars. It was just like the most peaceful moment you could ever imagine.
Moments like that where you're looking at the stars and then you write some poetry or something. When you read John Muir, for instance,
Right.
people are like, oh, yeah, that's just corny. Go read Thoreau in the Woods, you hipster. But it's really, you have that feeling when you're out here.
Yeah, and I think the reason people have trouble grasping it is that, like, even if you have experienced it, but let alone if you haven't, it's just such like an indescribable and intangible feeling.
But now, our serenity was replaced with scrambling over several fallen logs.
That's like mounting a horse or something. And dismount. You see a sign up there.
Oh,
yeah.
It's it. Good times, good times.
Oh, nothing brings more relief than the little tent symbol.
Oh my god, dude. Big down tree right in front of the entrance. Guessing it's farther up ahead.
Yeah, I guess so.
But we weren't in the clear quite yet. Before our campsite was a flooded patch on the trail.
Yeah.
Well, just get your feet wet if anything.
Yeah, I guess so.
Try not to fall in, that's the main thing.
Yeah, it's really not that bad. I got a little wet, but...
Up ahead, we saw a sign warning about trees falling over in the wind, which was a bit concerning, considering today's unusually strong winds.
Wow.
This is great.
What a campsite. Oh my god, it's huge.
Luckily, our campsite was fairly open and very spacious.
On this trip, we were planning on using 3 distinct methods to start a fire, so we got to collecting wood.
We each wandered through the surrounding woods, picking up sticks until we had a sizable collection.
For tinder, I had collected some dried grass, fluffy goldenrod seeds, and, most importantly, tulip poplar bark.
Right now I'm taking all of this thick tulip poplar bark and sort of pulling each of the fibers apart. So I'm pulling apart both like left and right, but also like front to back because there's kind of different layers of fiber in the thickness of the bark. This creates more surface area and tinier fibers that are easier to catch a spark. And we're gonna need a really good tinder pile for this method. It's really important to not rush your preparation when you're making a fire. It probably is like half of the battle, if not more than that. If you rush, even if you do get your tinder lit, you might not get your wood lit and suddenly you're burning through precious resources.
With the tinder and kindling set up, it was time to begin. For tonight's fire starting method, we were going to be using a fire piston.
So here we have the fire piston, and the idea is you put some tinder, namely char cloth, in this little divot in this rod. You put the rod inside of this hole here, and you press it together. And the idea is that the compression will heat it up and create an ember. Now, one problem I'm having is that the tip of this fire piston is just slipping right off. But I do have my char cloth here, and we're just gonna go for it and see if it'll work out on it.
Unfortunately, there was no way to keep the fire rod's tip attached, so we had to switch to a new method.
Yeah, the tip came off. So here I've got the steel, and it's curved so that I can place it around my hands. Here I've got a flint that's been napped to have a nice edge. And again, we've got char cloth here. Even though it looks really different from the fire piston, this is basically just another way to ignite the char cloth, which will form an ember for our tinder bundle. Oh, there we go. Dang. Oh, wait.
You got it.
Once char cloth has taken a spark, it'll smolder slowly for a decent while. It's important to stay patient and calm as you transfer it to your tinder bundle. Then, it's a matter of feeding the ember oxygen.
Oh yeah, nice work. I can't see anything. Oh, my eyeballs. Oh, okay. Yes, yes. There we go.
Oh my god, that was great, dude.
So I'm kind of lifting and finagling with all the sticks and the tinder just to make sure there's some oxygen getting fed. I see some of the sticks igniting, but I really want to make sure they all start lighting up before I move away, adding more wood.
Once the fire was secure enough, we sat down to enjoy the warmth, then gathered and sawed up some bigger pieces of wood. Since it was already late, we decided to have a fairly simple dinner tonight. Canned cream of mushroom soup.
With the soup heated up, it was time to sit down and warm ourselves up, on the inside and out.
Oh, baby, this is what I live for. Oh, you got a big mushroom in that one.
Oh yeah, that is hot. Oh, that's so good.
Oh, thank God. No lukewarm soup for us. Man, in the woods, with a fire, with a pot of something.
Well, you know what we need.
What do we need?
Some bread.
Oh, you're right about that.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. It's a bread spoon.
Alternative to the bread bowl.
Oh, great.
After the main course, we enjoyed a rather animated snack.
Got a little treat today. Microwave popcorn, specifically for the band. Back in the day, they used to have ones that you actually put on the pan.
I feel like we've seen that recently. We just couldn't find it.
Yeah, they didn't have it, so. I know this works. I don't know exactly if it works on a campfire, but we're gonna find out.
It's heat, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at this buttery chunk. Looks like white chocolate.
It does, yeah. Let me taste that. It's buttery.
Make sure I got everything out, all the buttery chunks.
We put all the kernels into the pan and waited as they cooked over the fire.
Oh.
And as the last kernels popped, we dug in.
Oh yeah. That's something you're not used to on a camping
Yeah,
trip.
this is the first time I think ever. We got our movie right here.
It's funny, usually I'm not a fan of popcorn, but it tastes delicious right now.
But having it out here is like a treat.
Yeah. It's funny, when that was popping, it was like I was a kid rediscovering popcorn all over again.
Yeah.
With our childlike sense of wonder rediscovered, we enjoyed the starry night by the warmth of the fire.
We awoke on a cold but sunny morning. As we packed, we noticed the scenery around us that we hadn't been able to see at night.
There was a soothing stream nearby. Just across it was an old lean-to shelter that somebody had constructed. And needle ice had formed in the ground below us.
With our gear packed up, we set out from camp and hiked back to the trail.
We trudged back through the deep water and over fallen logs.
We hiked back to the trail, which was blocked by more debris.
Well, this is definitely covering the trail, but it looks like people have made a path around it.
Yeah.
The leaves look kind of compressed here.
And after bypassing the obstacle, we talked about how our night had gone.
So what was with the yelling?
Oh yeah. I forgot that we switched sides on the tent, and then I heard you rustling around and I felt you rubbing against me on the right. And I thought it was like an animal. And you like made a noise and I was like, oh man, that really is an animal. So I started just screaming.
I was like, what? And you screamed again.
I did? Yeah. Oh, maybe when you said what, that's when I heard.
Yeah, you must have thought that was an animal. Oh man, that was funny.
Yeah. How'd you sleep?
Wonderfully.
We were then met, of course, with a steep incline. As we hiked, we saw a down feather stuck on some thorny briars, but between the steep uphill grade and the sun, we weren't really wanting for any more insulation.
At the top of the hill, we came to a trail junction.
Oh, you can have horses here. Should have gotten horses. I love the tops of hills like this. So hopeful. And also flat.
As we continued, I noticed thickets of thorny vines and asked Andrew if they were invasive.
I don't think these are necessarily an invasive species, but typically when you do see like a plant like this taking over, that is not a great sign. Because like grapevine is also not invasive, and yet people say it's bad if there's too much of that taking over a forest.
Thankfully, during this time of the year, the forest still felt vast and open, and the clear sky was all around us.
We hiked on switchbacks that wound down the hill and eventually saw an opening in the distance.
There's a big grassy area here.
Weird. It's like a picnic table area over there or something.
Yeah.
Let's go have a sit.
Well, we might as well eat some stale nuts for breakfast.
We sat down at what looked like the foundation of an old cabin or hut, and we also found an old car ornament.
Pick a number 1 through 6, and the closer we are to your number, the better our weather is going to be this year.
Oh. Don't put that responsibility on me.
Well, it's on both of us, because I'm rolling the dice.
5. Hey!
Hey, that's a 5. That's a 5.
Yeah, that was 5.
That's a 5. High five to that.
The Picard is a much nicer god to believe. You know, eating this is what cats and dogs must feel like when they eat their kibble. They're like, well, I'm hungry and this is the only thing I got, so.
So this is for our meal tonight. But I thought, there's no way we're going to use it all, so I'm going to make ourselves a little cheese sandwich. It's not going to be melted cheese because it is far too cold for that.
How is it?
It's about what you'd expect.
That's some late night desperate college student dorm food.
Now, we headed back into the forest, where we were soon met with more downed trees and logs. But we also saw a tree that, surprisingly, was very alive.
If you didn't know any better, this ridgy bark might just look like any other tree. In fact, I used to have trouble distinguishing this from tulip poplar, but this is actually an ash tree, and you don't see these that much anymore because of the emerald ash borer, which was an invasive pest which basically killed off a bunch of these. The bark is like very ridgy. That's a very typical feature of this. And also the branches are one of the few opposite branching trees in Ohio. It's really easy to see how they're opposite branching actually. They've got these like nice thick branches too. But yeah, it's cool. You really don't see these that often anymore.
After that, there were, of course, many more steep, exhausting uphills to climb.
The name Smokies of Ohio is definitely warranted.
Oh yeah.
For the hills alone, but just the way it looks too.
I took a moment to catch my breath and collect some fantastic tulip poplar bark for later, before moving on.
We arrived at another road crossing. Then, on the next trail, we saw an open, deforested hill in the distance.
The hillside had been cleared to provide a view of the distant gorge.
With such great scenery and weather, we had to stop for a fancy snack.
Well, we were gonna have this later, but we can't pass up this opportunity.
No, we can't.
So we've got here a block of sharp cheddar and some sopressata salami.
As alluded to earlier, we've also got something amazing. Huckleberry hibiscus naturally flavored cream soda, and then San Pellegrino Aranciata Rosa, sparkling blood orange. And if you see here, it's got the foil top, which means you know it's gotta be good.
Oh, that's sweet.
Oh man.
This is the first time I've had a sweet drink in recent times that actually tastes really good.
Oh really? Oh man, that is
Oh,
really
that's
good.
This is just
Wow.
like, this tastes just like a grapefruit. It's like, how often do you have a cold carbonated beverage when you're camping?
Oh my god, almost never, dude.
So we got the cheese and the knife to cut the cheese. And here's some salami too.
Yeah, I'll get out two soprasettas for us. Yeah, make yourself a little sopressetta sandwich. Oh man. 2 minutes in heaven's better than 1 minute in heaven.
Amazing view, amazing meats and cheeses, and amazing drinks.
This is living right here.
This is living. This is also energy that we really need.
One more toast over.
After that sumptuous meal, we were feeling reinvigorated for our next bit of hiking.
There's been a few strenuous uphills, but thankfully most of this has been not too bad,
Yeah,
right?
surprisingly flat today.
Yeah.
Man, how could the weather be this perfect?
This is really perfect weather. It's a really nice change of pace, honestly.
Even though it was still winter, the sunshine gave us a sense of the coming spring.
We saw yet another animal sign on the trail.
It's been eating a rodent or something.
That's weird that they poop on the trail.
Well, it kind of makes sense if you're an animal to take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, but they could poop anywhere. But it's like as soon as they get to the open, they probably do poop anywhere.
Yeah, this route, we're just finding them on the trail, too.
It's not like we were looking for the poop off trail.
And then we saw a strange tangle of branches on a tree.
This is I would say like definitely caused by a fungal infection of some sort. The tree hackberry often has like some sort of a fungus in it that causes things called witch's brooms, which are kind of like this but much smaller, but you'll see them all over the branches. Yeah, there's a few others up there too, some smaller ones.
So this is just like the tree though, right?
Yeah.
So is this like a prime directive thing where you aren't supposed to cut that off?
Yeah, I think so.
Let nature take its course?
Witches' brooms like these can also be caused by bacteria, insects, viruses, and more. They can actually be economically beneficial for crops like cocoa and Chinese dates.
We kept hiking, and we were nearing one of the campsites along the trail.
So we should be getting really close to the campsite soon. And that'll be 5.2 miles, I believe.
Which means we'll have like 3-ish miles.
Yeah.
Every time you're on the trail and you're like hiking uphill and then you get to the top and you have that contrast, it teaches you a lesson about how in life you need to put up with some of the bad to live like the ideal life. And the lessons we learn in nature like that, they stick with us only insofar as like we know them. Like that feeling we had last night looking at the stars, it's so fleeting.
Yeah.
And if you're not constantly seeking those things out, then you forget about it in a real visceral sense. That's ultimately what really made me fall in love with backpacking is when you're out here, you're experiencing conditions and an environment that forces you to live a very healthy and like balanced life.
Yeah, exactly.
But as soon as you go back to civilization, it's so easy to fall back into bad habits unless you're like very vigilant about seeking out that sort of balance.
There are plenty of good and bad things happening in society. But out here, what we typically think of as good and bad are balanced out in a way that compels you into a sublime lifestyle, even if just for a little bit.
As we neared the campsite, I noticed something vibrant and green sticking out from the duller winter grass.
These are a nice green food source that grow through the winter. Little wild chives. We find those a lot in Ohio.
We hiked towards the campsite and stopped to rest for a bit.
Now we were going to have a snack and start a small fire, again using a unique method.
Well, I will let you get the rest of the charcuterie out.
I'll charcuter.
And while you do that, I will start processing all this bark that I found. So it's funny, sometimes you find bark that is in much better condition. Like this stuff was really flexible, really fibrous, and it all came off in really long pieces. I think it really has to do with like the freshness of the bark. If it's been sitting around too long, it probably rots and gets too brittle.
When did you discover how much you enjoyed working with wood?
I would watch things on TV of people doing stuff like that, and you could really tell it was satisfying. And then like just the first time I actually went out into the woods and tried it myself, like peeling this bark off was an incredibly satisfying experience. Like you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like that's a big part of the appeal is just like that visceral, satisfactory feeling of working with it.
Tactile, olfactory, visual, auditory.
I remember the first time we ever tried to start a fire.
Was at
It at
Hocking
Hills. My brother took us camping.
And I thought you could just hold a lighter up to a log.
Yeah. Had no idea, dude.
Yeah.
There's literally no idea. We were just like, well,
I think part of that is because you would always hear about the dangers of fire as a kid. So like, oh, this stuff must be really flammable.
Yeah.
But no. Pulling this apart is like pulling apart a coconut husk or something.
Once the fibers were all separated, it was time to prepare our tinder bundle.
Got all this beautiful, almost delicious looking tinder. Looks like squid jerky or something. But bundle it up and rough it up a little bit more to get the fibers more loosened up. And we've got plenty more bark. And I've also got some that's already sort of been worked out. So we can just mix that in as well. I've got a pretty decent tinder bundle here. You know, if you're in a survival situation and you're not sure, you might want a bigger one, but this is good for us. And I took a little bit off of it, and I'm just gonna like fluff it up even more and then start rolling it into a ball in between my hands. And you kind of want it to just be like a little, I don't know, like a chocolate covered almond size piece. And you want to roll it up actually pretty tight. So not including the defunct fire piston, this is our second method of starting a fire. I tried doing this in Yellowstone and it didn't work. So this is my redemption. And I've got this magnifying glass, which is actually my dad's, so thank you, Dad. I've had this in my backpack for several years now, but I don't think he noticed it missing. I'm gonna take this little egg, put it in the nest, and then we're gonna take the magnifying glass and focus that light. That is really bright too. It's like sometimes you don't even want to look directly at it, but it's smoking. Oh yeah. So with this, like once it starts smoking, you want to keep it on there for a little bit.
Now, to be clear, this just generates an ember. It doesn't actually catch like on a big flame or...
Yeah, right. You can smell it too now.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know when to stop?
I mean, you can kind of check, but I think you just want to see a good amount of smoke coming out and see some actual bright orange stuff. Sometimes it's hard when you're staring at it to know if you're focusing fully, but clearly something's working. Oh. Okay, I might need to go at it some more actually.
Okay. Now, does this fire starting technique have any advantages over the other one?
It's just, you know, if you have a magnifying glass and nothing else.
So you wouldn't recommend this over another technique like a feral rod?
Well, actually, what I will say is that as long as it's sunny out, a magnifying glass is a renewable resource. A ferro rod eventually gets worn down. So if it is a sunny day and you are, like, for example, surviving, you might want to do this so you can save your other resources for a day where it's not as sunny and ideal for this.
I can see a flame on there.
See, I think what you think is a flame is actually the light.
The light?
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, I'm going to give it a go, I think.
Once your little bird egg is smoldering enough, it's just a matter of getting enough fluffy tinder around it and blowing plenty of oxygen into the ember. Once there are flames, it's helpful to turn your bundle upside down so that the fire reaches up towards the yet unburnt tinder. Then, take your prepared bundles of kindling and place them on top, making sure not to suffocate your fire.
So here you're just lifting it up a little bit.
Yeah, just
To get
feed
the
it some
wind under
oxygen,
it?
make sure it
Yeah.
doesn't suffocate completely until these sticks light on fire. That is fire.
Yeah, good job.
There you go. Feels good on the hands.
So was that easier or harder than what you've done before, or about the same?
It was about the same. It helped because the first time I did it, it was kind of like a fairly cloudy day. So you had to wait for the little window of opportunity, and even then it was like not the fullest sunshine, but
With our fire made, we use the rest of our charcuterie ingredients to make a fancy sandwich.
well, we might as well use the fire to roast a little snack.
Smells pretty good. The fire, that is. Not the food. Nice woodsy smell. Like it.
Once the bread was perfectly toasted, we chowed down.
Some nice melty cheese. Nice toasty bread.
Oh, good. It's funny how toasting bread could make it so much better.
Yeah. Hey, who gets an untoasted sub sandwich?
This is a waste.
It's a nice day.
feel like I'll be able to hike at least half a mile now.
We then doused the fire and filled up on water from the nearby stream.
And on the banks of the stream, Andrew noticed a familiar tree.
So in this forest, we've seen a lot of like oaks, tulip poplars, obviously, maples. Something you don't often see in Ohio forests are sweet gum trees. And I was just walking around and I noticed all these spiky balls. And up close, they really look like something that like H.H. Geiger would have drawn or something. They look really weird and alien. And actually, this is one of the leaves from the tree. Really beautiful, kind of a 5-pointed star shape. And there's one over there, and it's got kind of this like generic ridgy bark. So it can be hard to tell it apart from other trees, but you can cheat and just look up in the branches and see the little spiky balls hanging. A lot of times when you do see these, people grow them ornamentally in their yard, but then they complain because they're walking in the yard and they step on the spiky balls. But yeah, it's interesting because when you see these, that's kind of a sign that you're starting to approach the south. And like we're on the southern border of Ohio. These are a lot more prominent once you get to the warmer weather deep south.
Now it was time to resume hiking. We followed the path leading out of the campsite, which led directly to another road.
A warm, early evening light illuminated everything as we found our way back into the woods.
Here, tangled vines swirled around each other and around the trunks of trees. As we hiked along a bank, Andrew spotted another notable tree.
This is an elm tree, and it's got very ridgy bark. If you look up close to the bark, it almost looks like thin layers stacked on each other. And also the pieces of bark are actually like very soft, almost like a styrofoam texture. This is a good tree of interest for anyone interested in the outdoors because one, it's good for making bows. You'd obviously need a straighter tree with less of these sort of branches. And also, in the springtime, elm trees that are dying are one of the key places that morel mushrooms grow. And obviously that's a highly prized mushroom that a lot of hunters like. There's these really big leaves all over the ground. I'm actually not 100% sure what tree this belongs to. But this to me looks like it's the northern catalpa tree. It's got sort of this like heart shape, really big. And these trees also tend to have really long seed pods growing off of the branches. But it's a really interesting tree, and I feel like I don't see it that often, but it's got huge leaves. Well, that's a big beech too.
As we continued, our spirits were high. Maybe it was the entrancing glow of the sun, or maybe it was the meal we had just enjoyed.
Either way, we weren't the only ones that had recently enjoyed a meal.
So I'm not the expert on like identifying birds, especially by the signs they leave behind, but whenever you see a row of holes in a tree like this, all horizontal, it typically is some sort of a sapsucker. I'm gonna throw out a guess and say it's a yellow-bellied sapsucker, but if you look up the tree, like along the trunk, you can just see how systematic it is. Like there's just these two columns of perfectly straight lines of little sap-sucking holes.
Somebody had a good meal that day.
As we neared the top of the hill, we were filled with a sense of joy.
Not only were our surroundings beautiful, but we were also excited to get to tonight's campsite and enjoy a relaxing evening.
There comes a point in every hike where all you do is just dream about the food you're gonna eat later.
Yeah.
And we got something special planned for tonight.
I'm so hungry, I cannot wait.
It's an Andrew specialty.
Might even cook it the classic way too, if you know what I mean.
I don't, but I'm ready. No, actually, I do.
And then we came to another trail intersection.
Bona fide horseshoe.
Dang, they have some thick nails if you can nail that far in without hurting them.
Yeah.
Horses are weird.
Yeah, they are.
So we're going this way?
I gotta say, kind of wish I had a horse.
8 miles is a lot longer in reality than it is on paper.
Yeah.
As we continued hiking into the golden evening, Robbie found a curious object on the ground.
So Robbie found this thing, and he said it looked kind of like garlic or something, but this is actually, I think, a piece of a sprouted hickory nut. If you look all around the ground, there's all these hickory nut shells too. So this is about the time where they start sprouting, and you can find them in the ground if you dig up some of the leaves.
There was another plant just off the trail too.
So I think the ghost of Christmas present has visited us. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's this holly plant here. I have to wonder how this got here and why it's the only one. Also, when I was a kid, I thought this was mistletoe.
They're interchangeable as far as I'm concerned.
No, it's a different plant. But
After that, we briefly stopped to rest before moving on.
Okay, so we just took a break. Had some thoroughly musty nuts. But I think we can beast out the last portion of the trail here.
yeah, I don't think we'll need to eat any more musty nuts today.
No. I don't think I can eat any more musty nuts.
Dusk set in as our trail again brought us to a road.
Wait, does our trail just follow this road?
Yeah,
Or do we actually hike on the road?
I think we hike on the road,
Oh, crazy.
which is a nice way to end it out, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really funny, the forest just ends. Like it's a sudden cutoff.
Wow.
That's so cool. That electric pole has a blaze on it.
Oh, wow, interesting. Yeah, so we're going to campsite 3.
And it's pointing us to the left, so.
Yeah.
That's great. I never thought a trail this hard would end up being this nice and smooth for the last minute.
Yeah. Cool.
I really enjoy the idea of like backpacking through complete pristine wilderness and stuff. Like there's something really cool and appealing about that. But there's also part of me that really loves stuff like this,
Yeah, same.
where there's just a sudden like change into civilization, and like we're just on this road by the stream. It's so weird, and I don't know. It's like it makes it really cool.
Hiking along this road felt incredibly nostalgic, like a walk around the neighborhood on a cool summer evening.
What I'm about to say is extremely obvious. Hiking on pavement is so much easier than hiking on a hill with rocks.
After the hike today, I want nothing more.
It's funny, this feels like the end of our trip,
It does, yeah.
but we still got tomorrow.
It's like very surreal, the change in scenery.
It's weird.
Through the trees, we saw a red-tailed hawk perched on a branch.
We continued hiking along the road, which ran adjacent to woodland. Then it opened up into what almost felt like a small residential area.
Nearby was a house for forest rangers. Our surroundings reminded us that civilization was not as far as we may have thought, but somehow this didn't really impede the experience.
We also came across an elaborate gate of a Boy Scout camp, Camp Oyo, before following the road towards a strange entrance to our campsite.
Seems a mite treacherous. So,
The trail keeps going forward. Campsite is to the right.
looks like it.
the other side of the dam was an open grassy area.
Yeah, I think the thing that really fascinates us is the mixture between civilization and the backcountry.
Yeah.
Like when you can weave in and out of them.
It's like the idea of a continuous journey and just all the different places it'll take you.
Yeah, yeah.
And to see differences this stark, it's really cool.
We were curious what the campsite would look like, given our surroundings. But soon, the pavement faded away into grass and dirt.
Looks like this is it.
I guess they took us back into the woods just for this.
We hiked a bit into the forest and found a campsite to our liking.
Oh, and there's a bunch of firewood here too.
We settled down and took in our surroundings.
Oh, it's kind of funny. It feels like we're camping in someone's backyard.
It does.
Because you can hear like the road and
I feel like we should order a pizza and just have them deliver it to the road right there. Walk up.
that would be hilarious.
Is there any feeling quite like that 8-mile hike and then you come to a campsite and you sit down? The relief is like in the air. If you cut it with a knife, you're just like...
Yeah.
Now, after collecting wood, it was time to start a fire with a third method.
But
We had
this is
saved
going
the
to be
easiest
by far the
method for
easiest we
last,
saved.
the classic ferro rod.
As with the other methods, you want a couple bundles of like pencil to pencil lead thin sticks. You can just put them right on top of your tinder bundle there. So you take your ferro rod in the back of your knife. A lot of times people will hold the knife up to their ferro rod and draw back like that. But sometimes it's easier to just get it in there and really go at it. Oh, there we go. And then once the flame is there, you kind of turn your bundle upside down so it just catches all up in there. And we just take another bundle of small to medium sticks and make sure I don't lose my knife and ferro rod. Usually that's really impressive, but after the last two methods, it's like, not really.
Now that the fire was built up to a nice roar, it was time to cook our special meal.
Okay, so for our meal tonight, we've got some flour here. I'm gonna put most of it, but not all of it, into this. And then, of course, some water. I tried underestimating how much water I needed because I can always add more water. That looks pretty good though. There's gonna be a bit of like blackness on the dough from all the charred bits, but that's okay. Probably some dirt on my hands too. So it's not a lot of dough, but I think I'm gonna take this and then break it off into 2 pieces and we'll flatten each one. There's the first one. Here's number 2. And now the tomato paste. And of course the cheese, shredded mozzarella. When the moon hits your eye, like a big pizza pie, that's amore. And then the pepperoni. I don't want to just eat one too. Yep. Mm-hmm. Put that one in there.
I meant one for me too.
Oh, okay.
We waited for the pizza to cook over the warm embers of the fire, and before long, it was ready to eat.
Oh.
I've never seen anything more beautiful while camping.
Oh my god. comes out so cleanly.
Wow, this is incredible.
Look at that.
Bottom looks perfect. Oh man. Wow. Yeah, just let it.
This is so good. I'm so happy.
So about 5 years ago now, you and I filmed Hiker's Pizza at Dolly Sod's for the first time for Adventure Archives. What a difference 5 years makes. Oh man, that was good.
Wow. That is beautiful.
It's perfectly cooked too.
Yeah.
Like the crust actually tastes like a real pizza crust.
That is so good. Well, time to make another.
I'm gonna bite half of this so you finish the rest. This is our Venn diagram. And all portions of the diagram are delicious.
So we had originally brought it for the soup. I just realized that
Oh my god, yes. Ants on a log? Ants on a log.
minus the ants, I guess. I guess we could get some of those musty raisins, but
Yeah, that's we'll just get the log.
I would describe it. We all know how it tastes.
Now, our second pizza was ready to eat, and just as perfectly cooked.
It's still pretty hot, but
We enjoyed the pizza by the fire, but when we finished it, we were still a bit hungry, so we made some haphazard pizza toast.
one side of the bread is kind of burnt to a crisp, but the rest of it should be pretty good. It doesn't taste quite as good. I think actually a big part of that is just like the burning. But still, I mean, it's can't go that wrong with pizza bread.
Well, the section I just got, I didn't even think was cooked. But yeah, you're right. You can't really go wrong with it. It's got the ingredients. I'm still hungry. You my only friend.
And on top of that, we had baked a potato in the fire. The outside looked completely charred, but the inside was perfect.
We added some cheese to it and let it bake a little longer in the pan. Then it was time to eat. Oh, it's soft right there. This is gonna be good.
Oh man, there's the warmth. The warmth more than anything else is fantastic.
All right, get in on this. Get in on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that cheese that just adds a nice little touch to it.
Yeah.
One more.
Next, we set up our tent, but we ran into a bit of a problem. My tent pole had snapped this morning, and we had forgotten about it up until now. But with some finagling and some adaptive thinking, we worked out a solution.
So this tent is actually over 10 years old now. Bought it right after graduating from college, and it has been rock solid ever since. This is the first time anything on it's broken.
We used medical tape to give the pole a bit more structure when we set it up.
With shelter set up, we took a moment to enjoy the warmth of our fire for just a little while longer.
Do you feel more comfortable with the balance of civilization and getting back to nature now that we've been doing this for so long? Because I think we both had that feeling when we first started that we were just like over civilized. But I feel like lately I felt a little more balanced in that.
part of me appreciating civilization more is actually being out here and like realizing that there are things that are like really enjoyable about civilization.
Yeah.
But even then, all it is just like a hot shower and a soft bed. Like
Yeah.
the most simplest of things that it offers.
I remember when we first started, I had this real need for myself to be able to rough it. So I was like, nah, man, I'm just gonna sleep on the ground, no pad, no tent, nothing, and just sleep outside. And I feel like it was kind of like it was compensating for how many years of being coddled by a nice bed and climate control, you know? And now I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of meet more in the middle. If I can have a comfort, I'm gonna go ahead and take it.
The original appeal of backpacking to me personally was that it was a way to experience the conditions of society that our ancestors experienced. Conditions that tended to emphasize like equality and peace and happiness. And so I think part of that was like trying to get as close to that as possible. But when you think about it, those societies weren't roughing it. They were close to nature, but at the end of the day, they had a community to come back to. They had like huts or teepees or whatever with fires in them.
One of the sad things is that we kind of have to choose between being around a bunch of people and socializing with people or being in nature. It's not built into our
surviving with the barest minimum. Get as close to that as possible. But when you think about it, those societies weren't roughing it. They were close to nature, but at the end of the day, they had a community to come back to. They had like huts or teepees or whatever with fires in them.
One of the sad things is that we kind of have to choose between being around a bunch of people and socializing with people or being in nature. It's not built into our daily fabric of life to be able to sit by a campfire with like a whole tribe of people.
I really think that like being out here is not about surviving with the barest minimum. It's about learning to adapt to a kind of society where you are forced to do things once in a while, or you are forced to like exert some physical labor. But at the end of the day, that's also what makes the other side so good. The next morning, we broke camp as soon as we woke up. It was a peaceful, quiet morning, but the cold had compelled us to move about and pack up our gear.
After our gear was packed up and we freshened up at the outhouse, we talked a bit before heading out.
It was without a doubt way colder last night.
Yeah, I feel like I have mild pains just in various parts of my body, and the cold doesn't help with it.
I was in the fetal position for the majority of the night last night. Desperately bundling for warmth.
I was, again, slowly encroaching onto your air mat.
Every now and then I would like extend my legs and I could feel your feet on my air mat. Your body was like, I must find insulation where I can.
We gathered our packs and headed out for our final hike. We passed by lush green club mosses as we walked into the morning sun. Everything about this day felt familiar.
It might just be the smell of all this grass, but it just smells like such a nostalgic childhood morning, you know?
Oh yeah.
Just like being outside in the neighborhood.
We strolled back across the dam and onto the street on the other side of the stream.
We passed by a softly flowing cascade and crossed a bridge that led us out to the open road.
do we do now? Just like hitchhike?
I think maybe we do follow the road for a while though. I'm not actually sure.
They seem so good about putting blazes in some areas, and then when you really need it, I'm not seeing anything.
We hiked along the road for a little while before realizing that we had gone the wrong direction.
So yeah, the orange blazes that we were following, those are supposed to take you to the south backpacking loop, which must be...
We were supposed to have hiked further into our campsite, onto a connecting trail that would lead us back towards the trailhead.
And so, we retraced our steps across the dam, through the campsite, along the stream, and onto the actual trail.
The seclusion of the trail and the large moss-covered rocks gave the area an enigmatic feeling.
Now, we had reached the day hike trail, which would lead us back to where our journey had begun.
Beginnings. When we think back to our own beginnings, we think about what it was that led us on this path, documenting our adventures backpacking through nature.
Ironically, it was in our own home state, in an arguably unremarkable forest, where our original inspiration became the most clear.
Backpacking through the wilderness has always been more than a hobby to us. It is, on a surface level, incredibly enjoyable to explore nature, to see the sights it has to offer, and to investigate all the plants and mushrooms that grow out here.
But what makes backpacking so unique is that it lets you experience a microcosmic version of a different way of living. It helps us experience this world in a way more akin to our hunter-gathering ancestors.
The euphoria you feel after physical activity, the heightened sense of joy at even the smallest and subtlest of moments, the contrast of hunger and satiation, the natural sleep cycle.
All aspects of being out here, even for a few days, paint a picture of what a more balanced life might be like.
And all of these things come through even clearer in a place like this, where the focus isn't on some famous landmark or grand scenic overlook, but on the entire experience as a whole.
In everyday life, we deal with unfulfilling work, addiction, anxiety, shame, and stress. Backpacking through nature is a way to escape this. But more importantly, it points towards an alternative to all of this. An alternative to the drudgery and dreadfulness that so many people face day to day. And when we realize that there is an alternative, the possibilities for creating a better world become limitless.
These must have fallen off this decaying log here, but this mushroom with this like big cap and then this dark stem is called black-footed polypore. You can see why it's called that. It just turns black all of a sudden. And yeah, you usually see it just growing on dead logs like that. So this tree here is a black walnut. They typically have like this sort of darker chocolatey brown color and really thick ridges. And if you scrape away the outer layer of the bark, you'll really see a like dark chocolate color. Typically like in the springtime, you'll see little green growths on them, and those are walnuts with the husk on. And you can actually pickle them when they're really young and just eat the whole thing straight. Later in the season, you can also take the husks and use them as a dye. It'll stain anything sort of like this dark brown to black color. But you also have to wear gloves because it'll permanently stain your hands until your skin cells slough off. But yeah, and also obviously the nuts are edible, but the shells are hard to crack and it's hard to keep the nuts intact, so people don't typically do that. This is really strange. This almost looks like a plaster cast of like a chicken of the woods mushroom. But I think it's just a chicken of the woods mushroom that's really old and has lost all its color and kind of become dry and brittle. There's another cluster down there, but looks like we were a little bit too late. But whatever, it's still kind of a cool find.
You can't eat it now?
I mean, you could, but I wouldn't want to experience what you experience afterwards.
It's not like an old kale chip or something?
All right, hotshot. Let's see what the great Hong Long can do. Power levels 8,000. And McBride, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
Well, in this case, it probably doesn't matter. I haven't got a chance.
There is always a chance.
Slim, the Sarah Churchwell's most sophisticated weapon system, even in a computer mock-up, can't hope to defeat the Expedition Research LLC.
Well, still.
You don't have Clinton Corin Johnson, you don't have Tuck and Coop, you don't have Jessica Rokes, you don't have Jim Potts. What else have you got?
Jason Bourgeois.
John and Lisa Truitt have been looking for you. We ride for King's Landing today.
Before you go, you will call upon Liam, Eleanor, Henry, Oliver, and Charlotte, and tell them their mother and father wishes them to hike their own hike.
What good will my sympathies do them?
None, but it is expected of you. Your absence has already been noted.
Laurentine Ike means nothing to me. I can't stand the wailing of women.
One word and I'll hit you again.
I'm telling her mother, Kathy.
Go, tell her, and wish her a speedy recovery from her surgery so she can get back out on the trails. Prince Aaron Jones will remember that, little lord. I hope so. And if he forgets, tell him to go to DaytonHikers.org and take a hike. Hi there, I'm Charlie Joe, and this is my consulting partner, Jasper Caparota. I think we just got done interviewing your coworker, Sang Hyung de Krieger. So let's see. You are T. Bryce Ryan?
Yeah.
Is that your real name?
Yeah.
Are you any relation to the Patreon supporter?
No, it's just a coincidence.
Because I'll be honest with you, I love his shoutouts.
Oh, yeah.
I do. I'm a T. Bryce Ryan fan.
Me too.
For my money, it doesn't get any better when he says, "Plant a tree to save the world." But you must really love his music.
Yeah, he's pretty good, I guess.
You're gosh darn right he is.
Right.
So tell me, what's your favorite song of his?
I don't know. I guess I just like them all.
That's alright. I'm the exact same way, but it must be twice as hard as you for having the same name as him and everything. I celebrate the guy's entire catalog. Anyways, let's get down to business, T. Bryce Ryan.
You know, you can just call me S11N.
So this is the big red sandwich. What's inside of it?
Got some meat, but it's called that because they're special red sauce. It's like a salad dressing, I think. Looks like there's some mushrooms and cheese too. Actually really good.
These are funnel cake fries.
This is the type of bad decision that you'll make when you're really hungry, but it's also a really good decision. I know I shouldn't do this, but for your sake, the viewer's sake, I must do this.
It probably is actually going to taste pretty good.
Yeah, I think so.
It actually is really good.
You gotta eat all your grains.
Bread real quick. Toast it a little bit. So about a month ago.
You're gonna toast your hand if you're using that method. Why don't you like put it in a spoon at least?
Shut up.
Testing, 1, 2. Okay, so that was it. Turns out that we didn't put in a shout out for Eric Brumel. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to render again and upload. So the actual 4K version that you can watch as a separate video should be up tomorrow-ish. I'm gonna get that render started real soon here. I have to work on another video first. But that was it. Yeah. I think nothing else really needs to be said. Thank you everybody for joining. Hopefully that was enjoyable. Looks like everybody more or less enjoyed it. The shout outs I think turned out pretty well. It's every time it's like you have to be really creative to come up with something else, but there's like infinite material, so. And yes, Alex, you did see me sneak in a stream on Twitch. I actually would have been streaming yesterday, but I was uploading this video. So I might stream sometime soon. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. Oh, that'd be a good one, dude. Casablanca or whichever movie that was. Okay, thank you guys for joining, though. I need to get to work. I've got a video I got to work on right now. And I got to get this other thing edited. Or rendered. But thank you for joining. You can watch this video. It'll be archived. So if you want to watch the episode again before we get the fixed version up, feel free to watch that. But until then, feel free to leave comments, etc. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Okay, where's the stop streaming button? There it is. All right, see you guys.